Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. You should be used to us by now, but if you're not, my name's Laz, and on the screen opposite me is our other co-host, Mr. Felipe. How you doing, bro?
Oh, good, bro. I hope everyone is doing well.
Good. What are you up to today? Anything special?
Oh, well, nothing special. Just the same old gigging and teaching,
Yeah.
as every week. Yeah.
Lovely.
and you have got your rugby or whatever?
I do, yes. Yeah. Another one today. How's Soho? Is it hustling and bustling?
Yes, as usual. I mean, people, you just don't have the usual, boozers outside, you don't have people drinking outside anymore because it's really cold.
Because of the weather, yes. They migrate into the pubs then.
Yes, exactly. So now they have to deal with my band. we have a new slogan. We say we're less miserable than the weather. So you better listen to us than just stay outside.
Less miserable than the weather. That's a brilliant headline. Excellent. Right. Well, we're doing another album episode today. Felipe, do you want to introduce the album? And since you chose it, why don't you tell us why you chose it?
Yes, as you might have noticed, I even dressed up for this episode because it's
for listeners, he does look very sharp. He's got a lovely shirt on, a nice sort of waistcoat as well. So he's fully in the part today.
Exactly. It could have been because I just collapsed in bed after my gig with the gig outfit, but no, I dressed up for the episode.
We'll go for the dressing up for the episode as the excuse.
Exactly. Yes, that you can edit that part out. So the album is "Selling England by the Pound" by Genesis. Yeah. So that was released in 1973, and it's the fifth studio album by this amazing prog rock band. Okay, tell you that. Yeah, why prog rock band? We're going to go about it in a minute. So it was number 3 in the United States. Oh, sorry, in the United Kingdom, and number 70 in the United States. There might be a reason for that, right?
They might be British. Yeah,
isn't it way too English for the Americans? Maybe no offense, guys, but it's just a cultural thing, isn't it? It's like the lyrics have so many references about the UK, especially England, really, and but also Scotland. But it's a very, very, very English album, I would say.
Yeah.
So and for those who are used to Genesis as a pop band with Phil Collins on vocals, and for those of you who are used to listen to Peter Gabriel singing Sledgehammer, no. This is a complete different Peter Gabriel as a lead singer in a prog rock band, and Phil Collins as what a drummer, an amazing drummer. And I think when he became a lead singer, prog rock has lost one of its best drummers.
Yeah. It's funny though, because with this album, let me just think about where to start when I say this. The Genesis discography, how would you say this compares to maybe the album before and the album after?
It's got elements of both, because they were still kind of doing the same sort of stuff. I think this one is a bit more folk, because I think the album before was Foxtrot. The album
that's true. Yes,
the Lamb Goes Down on Broadway. Is that it?
Okay, you're right about Foxtrot, but I don't know about the one after.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, because they had this, they were doing prog rock basically, or you can't say just basically for prog rock, isn't it? Because it's not basic. But yeah, the whole idea of complex time signatures, long songs, and experimentation, that has been one of their characteristics. And the one thing about this album for me that stands out is that Steve Hackett is the hero here, really. And I would say it's more about him and Tony Banks, the piano player, than the other guys, in my opinion. Although everyone plays to a ridiculous level. But yeah, I think this album, I think they went really far in a good way in terms of musicianship. I think they play better, they explore their individual skills more than in the other albums, my opinion.
So why did you choose this album? What does this album mean to you, like on a personal note or a professional note?
Well, on a personal note, because that for me started with me going to a record shop back in Brazil to buy CDs. See, I'm from the CD generation, and I had some vinyls, but I'm more like CD generation. So I used to go to this record shop and talk to the owner like for hours, and he would introduce me to bands, all sorts of stuff, from pop rock to heavy metal. But he was a massive prog rock fan. He would be going on about those bands, and then I said to him, "Listen, if I have money for just one prog rock album, which one should I buy?" And he didn't hesitate. He just grabbed the CD and said, "Take it. And if you can't pay me now, you can pay me later. But this is the one you need." And I bought the album. I got home and I wasn't disappointed. And that was like my earliest memory. The other thing is, I was trying to convert my cousins into the rock and roll church. Like trying to. I was very excited about rock music when I was a teenager, and I was trying to convince all my friends to listen to rock music. Right. So listening to Deep Purple and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and all that stuff. And so I played this album to one of my cousins, and he wasn't impressed. And then when the second song started, his mum, my auntie, she came into the living room and started dancing and singing along. I said, "Oh, I remember that one. What a beautiful song. It's the song I know what I like."
Yeah.
So that kind of showed me that the album survived the test of time, and also it's got some interesting bits of pop music in it that everyone can relate to. But here's a prog rock album. Here's a rock album. Yeah. There's loads and loads of musicianship and advanced guitar techniques and all that stuff that musicians like when they listen to that kind of music. And the lyrics, man, I still don't get it. I mean, I've been in this country for 8 years, and the references, I'm just about like grasping the references in the lyrics. So I understand why someone who is not English wouldn't buy it. That's why number 3 in England, number 70 in the US, that explains a lot. It is a big gap,
But it's funny, it's really funny what you were saying about pop, because let me tell you what I know of Genesis. I know that they're one of my dad's favorite bands. I know that they are a prog rock band. I know that they've got some long songs and that they do this and they do that, and it's quite proggy. I also know about songs like Follow You, Follow Me. What album is that from? It's called And Then There Were Three, I think. I know that song. I know the song Land of Confusion, because another heavy metal band called Disturbed covered it. And that really is all I know of Genesis. But when you suggested this album... Go on.
No, because that's the pop version of Genesis, isn't it? It's another incarnation of the band.
You're right. But having said all that, what really, really surprised me on this album is when you compare it with the likes of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Yes, King Crimson, even Pink Floyd to an extent. We know that they're more rock than prog, but that group of sort of British prog bands, the blend of pop that they have in theirs is so much more than any others. And you've got this alternating. You've got one long 10-minute prog song, then you've got a short 3.5-minute pop song, then you've got another long prog song, then maybe an instrumental, then another pop song. And I just found myself marveling more than anything at the fact that we were hearing synth heavy, keyboard heavy, soft poppy vocals heavy prog music in 1973. I think there was a moment in each song where you could take out 30 seconds of a chorus, or where Peter Gabriel's singing in a section, and you could say, wow, that sounds like 80s pop. Yeah, it was done in 1973 by a predominantly prog band.
So, and that shows you that both Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, they already had the skills to create 80s pop music, for the good and the bad. I mean, they were the guys who were leading that transition, and obviously after Peter Gabriel left Genesis, and then it became Phil Collins' band. Really, he became the band leader. He became the voice of the band, and it's obviously not the same band.
Yeah.
You have the singer on lead vocal, drummer as the lead singer, and the singer left to a solo career. So you can't just call it the same band. I mean, it has the same name, but the Genesis after Peter Gabriel is a complete different thing. If I'm not wrong, I don't even know the name of the album, but the first album they recorded with Phil Collins on vocals, still very like prog rock. So, but it's obviously they don't change now.
He took over in 1975.
Yeah, that's it. So a couple 2 years after this album, yeah. And so the thing is, he's an amazing singer, of course. Peter Gabriel, though, has this theatrical quality to his vocals, right? He does different voices, he impersonates characters. Yes. And if you check any footage from that time, okay, that's another reason why I chose this album. I had a VHS
really?
of the show. I think they played the whole. I think it's on YouTube. I'll send you the link so you can add to the show. But so they played this whole album, or most of it, and they start with the first song, "Dancing with the Moonlight Night," and you've got the band. They have no stage presence at all. So everyone they look bored,
Yeah.
Phil Collins looks really focused on playing his drums, and everyone else, like Steve Hackett, just sitting on his amp or on a chair, I don't remember, for the whole gig.
Really?
Doesn't move. And then you have this majestic figure of Peter Gabriel dressed as a knight.
Wow.
Like this beautiful figure with the makeup, with everything. And he's the character from start to finish, and he is the show.
Right, I see.
It's incredible. And what he says before the first song is one thing. Is the thing I sent you. Can you read that with your best King's English? Is it King's English now?
Yes, it has to be. Yeah, right.
Okay.
So this is what Peter Gabriel would say before the show.
Yes, exactly. He would introduce Dancing with the Moonlight Night with those lines.
Here we go. Hi, I'm in the English Channel. It is cold, exceedingly wet. I am the voice of Britain before Daily Express. My name is Britannia. This is my song. It is called Dancing with the Moonlit Night.
Yeah.
Boom.
What do you think?
It's interesting. I mean, it's quite... I'm just looking at this, and you've got a lot of characteristics of England summed up in this paragraph. You've got the English Channel, the exceedingly wet, the Daily Express, the voice of Britain.
Yeah.
My name is Britannia, But yeah, no, interesting. I mean, what do you think of that little paragraph?
Well, you should know better than me, but I'll tell you what it says. My name is Britannia. I think the character himself is the culture of the country, isn't it? And it's a bit of a mistake of the traditional English values and all that stuff, but also maybe an acknowledgement of English history. I don't know what he means by that. Really,
do you know? I don't want to patronise you in any way, but it seems like I know something about this album that you might not. Do you know what it's about, and do you know why it's titled this way?
I think it came from a Labour Party manifesto.
It did, but the whole point of the album was because Genesis felt that traditional English culture was dropping, and the rise of Americanism around the early 70s. So this
were they not right?
Saying, what?
I mean, they were right. I can just go around the corner and grab my Starbucks if I want.
Exactly, yeah. And this is like 50 years ago, isn't it? But
exactly.
That goes with what you're saying. What did you say? My name is Britannia. What did you follow? You just said you thought Britannia was the character.
Yeah. I mean, he says my name is Britannia.
Of a failing England, did you say, or something?
Exactly. So he's claiming to be the voice of the kingdom, isn't it? So I am Britannia. So for me, that's him like incorporating the culture of the UK as a person, as a character. So it feels to me like this is really, really tricky because it almost falls into the territory of concept albums, but I don't think it's quite that, because the lyrics are not connected to themselves as one long story or one big theme, but there are similarities, and there's reference of folk music everywhere, and there are things that connect to the songs and the lyrics, but I wouldn't call it a concept album, but there is a concept about this album.
That's a great point, man. I think something you said earlier, which I would touch on later, I've got it in my little Lazarus blog, but it's very, very theatrical. Very theatrical and very dramatic. Like, one thing I've noticed about the album, and again, I'll sort of touch upon this when I do my thing at the end, throughout the songs, especially the proggy songs, what I found really, really cool that took me by surprise compared to other prog bands is how much time they allow certain sections of music to breathe and just fully... what am I trying to say? To fully let their purpose be felt. I feel with other prog music, very, very quick, these bands to go into a solo, to go into a 7/8 section, to go into some odd time signature. Genesis, in all of the long songs, Dancing with the Moonlit Light, Firth of Fifth, Battle of Epping Forest, Cinema Show, they all had moments where they would sit on one riff, one 4-bar repeat of music, and repeat it over and over for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, once that had sunk in, then they transitioned to the solo. And I felt that was very theatric, because it's almost like if you close your eyes and you're hearing the music, well, nothing's changing in the music. You're just going over the same chords or the same riff, whatever, for a minute and a half. You can imagine something happening on a stage. The Battle of Epping Forest. You can imagine a little battle happening between these gangs. I'm sure we'll get to the content of the song later, but because these songs, because they give 2 minutes to this bit of music, and they say, you know what, this bit of music, you do your thing, you let your listener fully engage for a minute and a half, and nothing else needs to be done, because that's what music is.
Exactly, and I feel like those long sections when they transition from one part to another, and it's just almost too quiet sometimes, So they come from it's like there's an explosion, and then they just melt into this like really quiet section, and there's a flute that happens in several songs.
It does, yeah.
And so you have the elements of classical music and folk.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that is it sounds like a soundtrack, when you're watching a movie and there's a scene going on.
Yeah.
And you have that music in the background that is not always intended to be loud and aggressive. Sometimes it's just background music.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me that it's not it's not a soundtrack for a movie, it's a soundtrack for a book. That's how I see it, because it's proper. The way the storytelling style of the lyrics for me is like a storybook. It's not like a movie or maybe not even theater.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. I mean, the album starts off extremely folky. The first vocal melody you hear is sort of reminiscent of like an Irish folk song or something. But then what really intrigued me, and I mentioned about this pop thing, I will do my best. I don't know this genre well enough. It's called neo soul, and it kind of started coming back. I don't know if you remember when we were at uni, people started crazy over
Everyone was going on about
exactly this early 2010s, mid 2010s. And what you're talking about here is, how would you characterize neo soul? Because it's kind of like, I wouldn't say odd time signatures, but unorthodox beats with clean guitars that play loads of notes, and then normally a vocal coming over the top.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, isn't it? I think you summed it up really well. Yeah.
So anyways, I think that all I wanted to say is that at 1 minute 20 of Dancing with the Moonlit Night, unorthodox, odd time signatures that sounds exactly like a piece of neo soul music I'd heard a few years ago, but happened in Genesis's 1973 album. I'm going to try and find a neo soul song that vaguely resembles what I'm talking about to put in the playlist to you guys. But yeah, just a little, and it comes back at the end. Isle of Plenty. Because it's that is, you know that.
Yes, exactly. The last
so it's like the start and end.
It's a 2-minute song, which could have been just the last bit of the first song. So that is where you really get into concept album territory, isn't it?
Yes.
You could loop the album, and the last song would kind of blend into the first one, wouldn't it? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Which you couldn't do with a vinyl, but you can do with CD or streaming.
No, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about now? I mean, did you want to talk about any particular song?
I wanted. When you said that they allowed themselves to stay on those sections for as long as it takes, there's a quote from Tony Banks, keyboard player, that sums it up. So this is exactly what he says in an interview. With Genesis, we just did what appealed to us, really. We didn't worry too much how other people were going to respond to it. Freedom. You do whatever you want to do.
Freedom, exactly.
And they were clearly in their own world. Like, well, we're going to do this, and in this case, he was actually talking about that song. Is it Firth or Fifth? How do you pronounce that?
Firth of Fifth.
Yeah, it's too much for my accent. So it's that is we're going to get into the songs then. Why not? So the first song, the first song is where the references start. The Wimpy Dreams that he mentioned in the song, and it's I didn't know it was a popular fast food restaurant in England. So
Wimpy's,
Wimpy Dreams. So he says that. So or it could be also a reference to Wimpy Homes, a property development company in England as well.
Right,
so we don't know, but it's if I mean, I had to research that. So it's those references. Not everyone can grasp. It's not a simple thing. And the line he says live at the beginning of the song, when he goes, I'm the voice of Britain before Daily Express. So that is when he's going on about that, all those references and stuff. He just in the live concert of the album, he sets the scene for the audience. And one thing I found brilliant is he finishes that line at the beginning. He's talking, and out of the blue he just starts, "Can you tell me where my country lies?" And it just goes, and it's like, wow. And that song, what I found, I think, I would dare to say this, is probably my favorite opening track of rock music. I just think it's because it's
a huge statement.
It is just shocking. I would say Highway Star, War Pigs are great as well for different reasons. But this one for me is like it's just vocals, and then the guitar comes in. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
On the second verse, when the piano joins them, just that one extra layer of instrument, it takes the song to a complete different level, and it's deep, and it's like it gives me the goosebumps. I was listening to the album this week, and I listened again this morning before the show, and every time I listen to the song, I'm impressed by the song every single time.
It's just beautiful songs.
Yeah, interesting thing about it though is you can hear the tapping technique on guitar, which you might be able to describe better than me. What is a tapping on guitar?
So what's when? So it's basically fretting down on a. It's putting your finger down on a fret as if you're going to play it with a pick. And there's two kinds of ways to tap. You can then play the note with the pick, and then with your left hand use one of your other fingers. So if you're using your index finger on a fret, you play the note with a pick in your right hand and you're fretting with your left hand. And then before you finish playing that note, you put another finger on your left hand down to then play the next note up. The alternative to that is having your left index finger on a fret and using your right index finger to tap on the fretboard closer to so you're not picking down by the pickups or down the bottom end of the guitar. You're coming almost to match where your other index finger is, and you tap alternating using both your index fingers on the fretboard. Just go and search any Van Halen video to have a look to see properly what it's about.
Exactly. So that's it. So basically, I mean, you went really technical there. I like that. That's a really detailed explanation. Basically, you got both hands on the fretboard.
So he does that version, does he? The both hands.
Well,
on
he
the
does
fretboard.
that. He does that, but I think he does with the plectrum instead.
Oh, of course, yes.
Which is a really, really interesting thing. He does the tapping thing using the plectrum, because I saw the video. That's why I believe is what he's doing. But as you said, those kind of techniques, they became famous with Van Halen. So Steve Hackett was 10 years ahead of his time, because I don't know if anyone else was using that sort of techniques at this time. So you're a heavy metal fan. Can you hear the basis of heavy metal guitar play in this album?
Absolutely, man.
The soloing, not the rhythm.
Yes,
guitar,
no, I understand. Yeah, there's Eruption from 1978, Van Halen debut album. That was the kind of cornerstone for heavy metal guitar to kind of change and to see what else could be done with it, with your pinch harmonics, your dive bombs, your wah-wah pedals, all that stuff. But before that, you've got to look, guitar tapping, it really started coming into fruition in the 1980s after, like I said, Eruption. But before that, you got the likes of Santana in 1970 with Hope You're Feeling Better. You've got Genesis with the musical box in 1971. Steve Hackett again doing his thing. Queen, It's Late from 1977. Judas Priest, Hellbent for Leather, 1979. All these first instances of guitar tapping, and you said about it with Genesis, but he did it before. He did it 2 years before,
Right.
a song called The Musical Box in 1971.
All right. So I didn't. So listen to that. So it's probably someone might have done it before. We will never know, but it's probably the first
rock.
Yeah, and the first recording of that in rock music, isn't it? The first recorded song with that. So he's still a reference, and he was recently touring, Steve Hackett, with his band, playing early Genesis stuff. And for loads of the old school Genesis fans, they said that's a proper Genesis gig. That's the Genesis we want to see, which is Steve Hackett's solo career with the band just playing Genesis arrangements as the original versions. None of the pop stuff, of course, because he wasn't part of it. So so it's like amazing. So from that amazing prog rock first song, you go straight into I Know What I Like, which is almost like I've heard people say it's almost like a glam rock thing. It's a pop song essentially.
It is to me. I hear very Beatles-esque verse, dual vocal harmonies going on. Like I think there's a sitar in there as well. If it's not a sitar, then it's definitely a guitar trying to sound like a sitar. But it definitely has that Beatles vibe. And actually, the riff was rejected by Genesis for the album before because the guy said it sounds too much like the Beatles.
Oh wow!
The opening riff. I think they sort of tweaked it and then made it come back. But yeah, again, and this is very reflective, what I hear of the 80s pop, that synth. Yeah, I know what I like. And you got that really, it's not overproduced, but it's just the typical sound that, like, I'm not even going to try and do the impression of it, but you just hear it in the chorus, that synth that's going on behind. Very characteristic of Genesis and their pop sound, isn't it? But also very characteristic of pop in the 80s. And this is what the first thing I'm getting from this song. Beatles-esque verse with dual vocal harmonies, and very reflective of 80s pop with the keyboards. And I think you're hearing that in this 1973 pop song. Yeah,
and it's amazing again. Like you can hear the innovation in that, and the lyrics. So that's the one I think it's very, very easy to understand, not very complicated references. And he's again very theatrical. He's describing characters and how they interact with each other. And the main character, I love that. Like it's just like a working class guy. It's a lawn mower, and the album cover is based, or this song is based on the album cover, which was a painting by an artist called Betty Swanick. I hope I pronounced it correctly. The painting is called The Dream. So that character wasn't there, and they asked her to add him to the painting. And then they, that's a different version of the original painting with that character. And it's basically this guy just saying, look, this is how I live my life. I don't want to go beyond this. I'm happy the way I am, and people keep telling me what to do or how to improve in life and this and that. He just doesn't want it. So I know what I like, and I like what
I know what. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool. Nice little message. From that track, you go into Firth of Fifth, which I mean, I have to say that the piano at the start of this, man, is just sublime. And actually, unusually, this week I've sort of started listening to the classical stuff I like again. Beethoven, Schubert, Brahms, Bach. And to hear piano played like this,
it's beautiful.
It almost fits in. I'm sat there like a bit of Beethoven, bit of Brahms, bit of Schubert, bit of Genesis. Why not? Because it's just so fantastically executed.
It's classical, and it was intended to be a piano piece on its own. So really? It was written. Yeah, it was written previously, like not for the album. And then again is when that quote I said from Tony Banks is about this song. Like they had the freedom to do whatever they wanted, regardless of someone else's opinions.
And I actually said, if I wanted about the space given to instruments in this song.
Oh right, yeah.
This is so like what the guy said. I agree that this song they fantastically give the space to the instruments.
And it's about everyone, isn't it? And it could have been an instrumental song if they wanted to. There's so much to it. It's almost like you don't need the vocals. But then again, when Peter Gabriel is singing, you just have to listen. He's just brilliant. And the vocals, everything just kicks in, isn't it? After the piano intro, so it feels like it's going to be a classical piece, and then the whole band just comes in and it's explosive.
They come in with kind of like a hard rock riff with that distorted descending guitar, so the mood changes quite quickly. But I think it's a fantastic song. My favorite of the album, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, it's a brilliant song. It's regarded as one of the best prog rock songs ever written, and
really,
I
can understand why.
Yeah, when Genesis did the recent reunion tour, or the last tour with Phil Collins on vocals, they didn't have Peter Gabriel back to the band, so they're still doing the pop stuff, but they've played this intro. They've played that because it's so iconic. They need to play. It's just one of those things they need to do. Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is you have, talking about time signatures, you have 13/16 and 15/16 time signatures that intros. Like, for anyone who's a musician, that is completely insane.
Yeah,
and it's because he's playing on his own, so probably he didn't even think about time signatures. It's just like, hammering the piano in any way he wanted to, and it sounds amazing. And I've heard, even when we went to music university, I've heard, I've listened to people practicing that on a piano, because it's one of those things. If you are a piano player, you just need to know the song.
Yeah, it is fantastic executed.
And the title refers to a river in Scotland, the River Forth. See.
There you go.
Famously known as the Firth of Forth.
That's it. Again, more hints back to Britain. We really are there. They are hitting it home that they care about the British culture in this album, aren't they?
Yeah, they do. They do. It's interesting, isn't it? Like the fact that they are criticizing that. That's the political thing. Like, we don't want to be so Americanized. Yeah. We want to preserve our culture, which is and at the same time making a reference to the Labour Party manifesto. They were criticizing Americanism, and it's funny because it's like you have how things were different. You have the left wing manifesto talking about preserving the culture, which is a conservative idea.
Irony, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's just it's interesting because it's basically how culture can be beyond politics. It can go beyond politics in that sense. It's like it's interesting. I really like the whole concept and the whole theatrical thing about it. But then after that beautiful, extremely prog rock song, you just get into. Well, I'll tell you this. This is the one song I didn't like when I first listened to the album, and it's the only one with Phil Collins on vocals. So Phil Collins, I'm as a drummer, I'm a Phil Collins fan, of course, and I think he's regardless of for some of the rock listeners, regardless of Phil Collins' pop career being the main thing he did, and the thing he did for longer, I still think he's a rock musician, he's a rock drummer, and he proved it in this album. So the fact that he takes the lead vocals for one song, having Peter Gabriel as the lead singer in the band. I mean, why would you do that? And how can you deliver? And he did. I think now, I didn't like the song because, it's just, romantic pop ballad, acoustic. Now it sounded like a Bee Gees song to me. And I like them anyway, but I didn't like it. I think, this song just doesn't belong to the album. I used to skip that song. And now I've listened to it again. It's like, it's actually a really beautiful piece of pop music. It's pop music, a bit of folk maybe. But the way they strum the guitars is very simple, very basic.
Do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me, I've put my notes here. It's kind of like the softer songs that Greg Lake used to sing with ELP.
There you go. Which might be kind of essential to that kind of music to break from the complexity of the previous song, isn't it? Very
good point. Yeah, because, when you... I'll tell you honestly, and this is linked to what you just said. I'll tell you in my monologue, but I struggled with this album, not in terms of not liking it, but it's when so much happened. Right, when we did Yes, it was okay because you said go and check these songs, go and check this, and I think, okay, here's an 18-minute song, but I'm not analysing or assessing it. I'm just listening to get some characteristics. Because we're doing an album today, I had to go in, and I'm not putting my musical analysis hat on, but I'm trying to listen for things. But when you've got songs that are so long, it's hard to pick out characteristics of songs when they change every 2 minutes. So it's hard to find a central theme. So I think that what you said is perfect, because you've got the long with Dancing with the Moonlit Night, and then you've got the short with the poppy I Know What I Like. Then you've got long again with Firth of Fifth, and then More For Me. So I think you're absolutely correct, as in these little short 3 or 4 minute songs. I mean, again, 4 minutes is too long for a radio, but in terms of prog,
in terms of prog, it's really short. It feels like a punk song,
exactly.
It's like 2 minutes.
Having it in between those long songs really does break it up, and we noticed that Emerson, Lake and Palmer did that. Yes, do that as well. So I wonder if we are seeing early characteristics. Or prog rock's been going since the late 60s, so maybe not early characteristics, but set characteristics of progressive rock music and how to structure an album, because it's important, man, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I think as well, if Peter Gabriel had all that theatrical influence, I can't believe he's not into theatre. He most certainly is. So as a storyteller, you need to have some peaks of tension, story and complexity and clashes between characters. You have the climax at some point in the story, but you need a release in contrast to that tension. That point when there's been a war in a movie or whatever, and there's that one scene after the war, someone's in a hospital just having a conversation and talking to a friend, whatever. It's that kind of vibe to me. It just came from a really tense moment into that kind of okay, let's just chill and listen to something a bit more subtle. And I think they totally thought about the track list when they were doing this. Like, maybe we need to put those. They're like the second and the fourth song are very, very mild in terms of musicianship comparing to the third song. So that makes a lot of sense. So they made a sandwich of a prog sandwich, pop songs. But as I mentioned, sorry.
No, I was going to say that the shorter songs are the bread and the longer songs are the cheese, the salami, the lettuce.
Exactly. That's what and they did it. I think they've done it really well. Yeah. It's a long album, 8 songs, 53 minutes, if I'm not wrong, something like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting for, how can a long album feel, in my opinion, it feels short. When I finished listening to it, it's like, I want to go back to the beginning and listen to the first song again.
Yeah.
And so that leads us, I think I'm going to carry on with the song list because it's not too many songs. They're long, but not too many. So the Battle of Epping Forest, that was definitely, when I first heard the album, the hardest one for me to understand because of the lyrics. And then but now I believe it's just like this, the simplest of all the stories they're telling, apart from More Fool Me, which is just a relationship not working well. But this one is it's a battle of gangs.
Yeah, in
Epping, East London.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's it.
They describe the cars and the gangsters but that's what I like about it. Okay, I would say, I would dare to say, this is the closest prog rock ever got to hip hop. This is a gangster song.
Yeah, it is.
Because they're describing those dodgy characters from East London, and it's fast paced in terms of vocals, and it is the least melodical vocal line of the whole album.
Yeah.
His voice is still amazing. He's still like perfectly in tune all the time. It's beautiful, but it's almost or as close as you would get to a spoken word, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. Because he does that Cockney accent, doesn't he? And then
he does at some point,
About 5 minutes 45, again, because these are long songs, any bits I noticed, I did just take a little time check at. At 5 minutes 45, he does this, he has this kind of avant-garde vocal style, almost art pop like we heard with Bowie in Hunky Dory, very Lou Reed-esque. You're right, the spoken word thing, he sings, but there is a lot of time where he does the Cockney accent, the avant-garde vocals, where he's having a conversation with you.
Yeah, exactly, and it's cool, isn't it? Because when I first heard the song without understanding much of English, it was like, it's about like a medieval battle, isn't it? You know?
And it sounds it at the start. It's got a medieval sound, isn't it?
Exactly. It starts with that's what I find beautiful about the beginning and the ending of this song. So it starts with a marching snare drum, like perfectly executed by Phil Collins, like. Technically speaking, it's just perfect. If you're a drummer, listen to that. It's just amazing. From the tuning of the snare to the execution of the technique itself. So you have that marching snare with flute, isn't it, at the beginning? It does sound like it could be medieval or colonial times, and I think that's the intention, right? And at the end, so isn't that a reference to the fact that since the beginning of times, people fight for territory and they kill themselves for stupid reasons and stuff like that. Yeah. And at the very end, they criticize this kind of stuff with a perfect line. There's no one left alive. It must be a draw.
But I was reading about this song, and it's a bit of a ballad. And just for clarity, what ballad means, literally in music terms, means a song that tells a story. I know that these days we think a ballad is a slow song that you can romantically dance to, but it is a ballad in terms of it's telling a story. And he wrote characters in these battles, and the band thought that the lyrics weren't as serious as they should be because he's talking about a battle going on between gangs, and in the end. In the last verse or the last section, he talks about the winner being chosen by the flip of a coin.
Yeah.
It's just crazy because that goes back to what you said about a draw. You fight.
It was a draw because everyone, but the funny thing is like everyone died. So it's a draw. I love that. That is like, for me, that's British humor at its best, because that's a total piss take. Like, everyone died, so it must be a draw. Okay, if it's a draw, we need to flip the coin.
Yeah. To see who won. And that's so British.
There's no one alive. Why would you pick a winner? It's just brilliant.
Oh, God, yeah.
Let's flip the coin.
Oh, Jesus. Then track 6 of the album comes the song After the Ordeal, and I'm sure the ordeal being the battle, and this is after it. And it is a lovely kind of pseudo-classical song written by Hackett and Rutherford. There is elements of the poppier stuff that creeps in on top of this orchestral performance, isn't it?
Yeah.
because you've got this classical music, and actually, do you know what? A lot of the band didn't want it on the album apparently, and it was intended to be a fully electric, but then they turned it acoustic, which I thought
turns electric halfway through.
It does, yes, but even in the start, you've got it acoustic, but also you've got the keyboards underneath as well.
Yeah,
which is funny because it's kind of the contrast of these acoustic classical instruments, which is reflecting the old times, classical music, English heritage, whatever. And then your modern synths and keyboards coming in, the newer times, the Americanism, just I thought it was a contrast.
Well, maybe that was intentional. If it wasn't, it worked anyway.
Exactly.
And again, it's when they when you don't expect anything to happen, we think, well, that's clearly like a transition between two songs, an instrumental transition. Then halfway through, you just have the groove and the guitar solo, so it becomes even more electric and more groovy halfway through. So it sounds to me like a two-part song.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah. Should we go cinema show?
Cinema show. So if you consider, Isle of Plenty as, again, a transition maybe, or a reference to the beginning of the album, so that would be effectively the last song. The cinema show would be,
yes,
to all effects, the actual ending of the album, in my opinion. And so let's go into that. That's it's a modern day version of Romeo and Juliet, isn't it?
What do you mean, like lyrically?
Oh, it is lyric. Yeah, he mentions Romeo and Juliet in the story, so that it's she's late for her cinema show. I mean, they go into the cinema and stuff like that. So it's So there is so the lyrics were written by Tony Banks and Rutherford as well. So the bass player. So
they were actually inspired, though, by a T.S. Eliot poem called "The Wasteland." So again, more inspiration from other sources like poetry,
Yeah, and exactly, and it's slightly more sexualized than Shakespeare would do for this version of Romeo and Juliet. So Romeo is he's got some clear intentions of what he wants to do with her, and it's. So you have basically British poetry. You have Shakespeare and T.S. Eliot and Greek mythology, and it's all in there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're right. But musically, we've got another very orchestral style song. You got the flute in there, you got the oboe, you got the 12-string guitars, you got the dual vocal harmonies as well. I thought it was really nice, and again, it's just funny how heavily the classical influence came in towards the later part of the album. It's definitely there at the start, but they kind of lean on it more towards the end, which I love. But yeah, then the second half of the song, again, another song that changes halfway through, where it just goes into 7/8 and you got that keyboard solo. Isn't that a fantastic solo?
It is. And as a drummer, I have to mention, it goes to 7/8, right? So you have like Phil Collins playing those really complex time signatures, really complex rhythms, and he couldn't read music. He still can't read music. He's not a trained musician in that sense, and he's just a very, very musical guy, isn't it? It's like it's. I got to say this: the drumming in this album, it's perfect, start to finish. Phil Collins is, in my opinion, at that time, he was as good as Carl Palmer, as Bill Bruford, all like prog rock drummers you can possibly mention. He was as good as those guys, but people still remember him as a lead singer.
Well, for that very reason, it's why I've never considered him to be one of the top drummers, because, I've always thought of him as the singer and the pop singer of Genesis. Never thought about him as a prog drummer, but he really does shine on this album, and especially this song, The Cinema Show. This is another song where I thought the space for the musical elements to breathe were fantastic. A lot of repeated musical phrases and sections, but ultimately it's satisfying. Think of the stage show we're talking about. Think of the book Felipe talked about. Yeah. Imagine you're at a section in a book and there's a sort of a scene that's going on and stuff's happening, but it's happening between characters, and in the background you just got this music going over and over that's perfect and it's correct and it's appropriate, but you just got it going over and over, and until that scene's finished and you're ready to move on to something else, i.e. a keyboard solo. You just keep hearing it and it builds you up perfectly to take you into that keyboard solo. Fantastic arrangements and songwriting on this album, man, isn't it? They really have nailed it.
Yes, they have, and I think it just occurred to me that this album for me is like a perfect soundtrack for a theatrical storytelling of British culture.
Yeah,
that's how I see it.
And it's almost like you'd if I can imagine with what you just said happening, you'd go into this album asking to remove the vocals from the album, leaving the music, and then writing scenes over each song. Like, nothing against the vocals, they're fantastic, but just in terms of putting on a theatre show of British culture, you could write scenes with actors for each section of the songs, couldn't you?
Exactly. It's what it is. I mean, it's and you could even say that like Peter Gabriel is like the main character, in a theatre play, and you have probably Tony Banks as the director. It's something like that. And I mean, it's perfectly executed all the way through, and whatever idea they had in mind, I think they've managed to accomplish. What an album!
What did you have a favorite song?
Well, the opening track for sure.
Oh, you said that. Yeah, you loved that. No.
Yeah, I think it's no, because I said it's my favorite opening track, but but it's still my favorite song in the album. Which it's hard when you start with such a good song and you have to match that quality throughout the whole album, which I think they did anyway.
That's a really good point, because I struggle in general with prog because it's not the sort of music I listen to. So if there's a song, if you've started me off with an 18-minute song, no, not this album, just sort of giving an example, but if you start me off with an 18-minute song, then to have held my attention for that long, and I don't mean me, Laz, I mean in general, the listener, to have held my attention for that long, you got to match it with the following songs, because then you're asking me, okay, well, we did the 18-minute song, fucking hell, now there's a 12-minute song to come, and if you're not enjoying it, it's going to be hard to carry on. But you're right that the quality of this album, whilst I do think the first track is probably one of the best, I like Firth of Fifth, which is the third song. It all matches up. The quality is all there. It's consistent throughout the album, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Fantastic songwriting and musical achievement. Yeah, brilliant stuff.
And for me, like every time they go into a quiet section, you feel like, okay, cool, that's it. That's it. They're gonna just like lead to the end, and then something comes, something happens. They keep surprising you. It's like, and they still surprise me to this day after having listened to this album. I don't know, 100 times. Something like that.
I think it's a good place to wrap things up.
Yes.
What's rock and roll about this album to you? What makes this album a classic rock and roll album that you think everyone should listen to? For what reasons?
Oh, wow. That's tough. I think it's, as we said time and time again, the musical freedom is the fact that they don't bother playing a piece of classical music as an introduction to something that sounds almost like hard rock, just before playing a romantic pop ballad on acoustic guitar. So like the fact that they don't really care what's going to happen next in a certain way. It's very polished. It's like we can do whatever. We could just play 15 minutes of songs, highly complex, but we decided to stick this 4-minute pop ballad in the middle because that's what we want to do. And we decided to give the lead vocals to the drummer for one song. So that is like that freedom of telling the story with quality, but in any way you want. And
I agree with that.
They piece things together. They put like bits and pieces of different compositions and make one song out of it. That's very rock and roll to me. Like they clearly had pieces of songs that could have been different songs. So we're going to make one song out of all of this.
Yeah,
this is very, very rock and roll, specifically.
No, you're right.
Rock.
No, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. That's great stuff, man. I'll give you I do the little Laz monologue thing.
Yes, my favorite part of the show.
I liked it. I thought there were some songs on there that I would go back and listen to, but it was all just slightly too poppy for me. But again, no slight on the album, and I'm here to be objective. So here's but just so you know my thoughts going into my little monologue. So I've got something I enjoyed about the album was the blend between prog, rock, and pop. They made effortless transitions from one to the other. Peter Gabriel's lead vocals really soft and suit the pop style, whilst the music has enough of each other style to create a balanced approach to the music. And what I mean by this is that there are moments of progginess with odd time signatures, dissonant and jazzy chords that stand out. But then to counter that, there are plenty of really agreeable hard rock and pop style melodies and music that is much more agreeable to the listener and makes for a much more pleasant listening experience. The other aspect I loved is how much time they gave to the music in their songs. I've already mentioned this. They let certain riffs and sections go on and breathe as opposed to just jumping from section to section unnecessarily. It really built up and prepared you for the oncoming solo as opposed to just jumping straight into a solo, which I know some prog bands do. I think the blend of these styles which we're hearing takes it away from the wanky prog style that we've touched on before, but because of the pop influence, it seems a lot more like a musical theatre score than a prog album, and for that reason it was enjoyable. Listening to it for the story, listening to the story they've written, listening to it as an experience, and from the first note he sings of the whole album, the whole thing felt theatrical. And if I don't think of it as, oh yeah, I'm going to drive here today, well, what should I put on? Should I put on More Fool of Me? No, it has to be the whole experience. And I think that's what they wanted for it. And I think that's what they wrote for. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the album.
Wow. Oh, wow, man. As usual, I really, really enjoyed the monologue. it's definitely my favorite part of the show, especially because I don't need to say anything on that part. It's yeah, man, you described it really well. And it's interesting to think that both Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins went on to create the template for modern pop music, pretty much in the 80s. They're so influential. As I mentioned, songs like Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel and In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, they changed the way people listen to and play and write pop music. You can tell that in order to do that, in order to recreate a style, you need to be musically really good. And I'm not into pop music as much as I am into rock music. Of course, that's why we have the show, isn't it? But the fact that they started together in a prog rock band, I think, is what allowed them to expand their music vocabulary and made them the extremely creative artists that they are. Yeah.
I love the fact that, at the end of last year we did Rumours by Fleetwood Mac, didn't we? And that's an album that is so hugely credited with pushing with the transition from rock into pop music in the late 70s. Yet 5 years before that, you've got this one doing the same thing in a different country. I just love it. I love the genealogy of music, man, because you can hear a pop song from 1982 and you can, in it, I don't have any in mind, I'm just saying generally, and in it, you can hear the harmonies and production from Rumours, but yet you can hear the synths and softness of the vocals from Genesis. I fucking love it, man. Music is great, isn't it?
Music is great. I mean, especially when you can actually create without having to please anyone. And those like geniuses of rock music, there were guys who were not trying to please. I think they would try to please themselves. And accidentally they would reach people and communicate with a huge number of people, I guess. I think that's one thing is missing nowadays in music, which is just allow the artist to do whatever they want and let's see if it sells, instead of thinking about how to make it commercial before you actually start writing songs.
That's it. There's a fantastic Frank Zappa interview where he does this for a couple of minutes and he just talks about he says there was a huge transition from the 70s to the 80s, where in the 70s you had producers and label executives saying, let's give it a shot. Bands like Pink Floyd, like Genesis, let's give it a go. But then as the 70s went on and sort of turned into the 80s, you had more, no, we can't take a risk on this. It's got to be 3 minutes. It's got to have a lovely chorus. We can't take a risk on this. And Zappa just said, well, what happened to the days of, who knows? Let's give it a go. So that's a fantastic interview, one of my favourite ones. So I'll put that as a YouTube video along with the show notes. But yeah, anyway, good place to end it, man. Thanks for choosing. Yeah, man. Like I said, I'm happy to say it wasn't anywhere near one of my favourite albums that we've done, or that I prefer other Genesis stuff, but it was so good to get into it and see what was under their skin and getting into their mind about this battles in Epping Forest, about the decline of English culture and the rise of Americanism, and
gangster prog.
But no, make no mistake, man, just because it wasn't my favorite album, it was still a pleasure to listen to and a pleasure to hear executed so fantastically well by a fantastic band, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Amazing musicians.
Excellent. Anyway, right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As usual, we'll be with you again 2 weeks from now. Felipe, where can they find us?
You guys can find us on a place called the internet.
One day I want us to say you can actually find us on page 300 of the Yellow Pages book, where we're listed under a private business. Like the old pages. How do I find your plumbing company? Oh, well, we're in the Yellow Pages. Oh, so I've got to get a Yellow Pages. I've got to go to plumbing. No, you just Google it now. We should do the opposite. We should be the anti.
Yeah, just go back to the Yellow Pages.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah, you can find us on the internet. And thanks for being with us again. Remember, don't do anything I wouldn't do. And keep on rocking, everyone.
Yeah, never do anything Felipe wouldn't do. Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. And as always, long live rock and roll.